So children, I have a story for you today, and I'm going to start it off with this. I'm going to ask you, I've written it on the screen. You may not be able to read that, so I'm going to read it for you. It says, which of you would prefer to have a handful of these? Would you like to put your hand out and get a handful of them? Or would you prefer a handful of those? Okay, you'd prefer a handful of that. So would I. They're pretty, aren't they? Compared to what you were looking at, very pretty. Okay, now I'm going to ask a question, and if you can't answer the question, maybe Mum or Dad may have an answer for us. What will we call these grubs? Anyone know? Do you know what we call the grubs? What do you reckon?
Insects.
Okay, they are insects in the making. You are quite right. All right. Osh, do you know what they are? Let me give you a hint. All right. Our indigenous people, when they were in this land, long before we came to the land, they used to get these grubs and it was a delicacy. Imagine Mum coming home for dinner. Hey, look what I've been hunting for and look what I found for dinner. All right, and they would eat them. They loved them. Would you like to have some? What did they call them? The Aboriginal people called them, oh, I hear it out here, witchetty grubs. Do you children like to join us here, or are you happy to be there to listen? You want to stay there? That's all right. You stay there and you can hear the story too. Righto, so here we've got what are known as witchetty grubs. Now, when they have some of these visiting tourists come to these areas where the Aboriginal people used to once live, they try them with witchetty grubs. Sometimes in game shows they use them as witchetty grubs to feed to the people. We don't like them, but the Aboriginal people did like them. They were delicacies for them. So here you have, right at the top, that one's called a witchetty grub, and the ones down below have different names. The one I particularly want to talk about is the one on the left-hand side at the bottom, and he's called a flathead borer. And do you know what? These are not very good grubs to have, because this is what they do. You can see from the photographs, and now there are 3 different photographs of flathead borers. See how they're actually eating holes through the trunks of the tree or the branches of the tree. And before very long, those trunks, those branches are so thin and weak they will snap and fall over. So lots of our native bush has been affected by the flat-headed borers. But do you know what? And look at that horrible one down there on that bottom right-hand corner. Doesn't he look awful? Awful things, aren't they? They're not the sort of things you'd like to have a handful of. Okay, here's what they become. So you were quite right when you said they become insects. And these are the insects that flathead borers become. Jewel beetles. Oh, jewel beetles, they are some of my favourite beetles. For example, I'm going to now show you, and I'm going to have to get Ocean, if you wouldn't mind just holding this for us. I'm going to stand up here, if you wouldn't mind, Ocean, on about the second step. Okay, so, all right, one has just fallen out. You must have had a little bit of a bump. I'll just take that one out for a minute so he doesn't right in. Just hold them about that position. Righto. So here we've got some jewel beetles. Now, jewel beetles, you can see in my box, make up the biggest part of the box. And here they are closer up. Aren't they pretty? You can see them here. Look at all the pretty colours. Pretty greens and blues and reds and yellows. All kinds of pretty colours there with the jewel beetles, aren't they? And I loved collecting those amongst all the other insects I collected when I was much, much younger. In fact, you might see how much later. Just look at them from this angle. You can see that's just looking down on these ones here, the colour that's in those insects. And yet they came from those horrible old borers. Isn't it amazing how God has done this? All right, here's another shot. I like this photograph because right up in the top corner, there is the very big one, which you can see there. Riding home on my bike from school one day when suddenly I thought it was a small bird flying by. But no, it was that beetle. And it flew over. It landed in what's called a mallee tree was around our property. Lots of bush and mallee trees. It landed there. There was some blossom in the mallee tree. And I managed to get it by bending the stick of the mallee tree down low enough so I could pick him up. And he became part of my collection. All right, so lots of interesting beetles amongst them. This one shows you how long I've been collecting them. You might not be able to see this, but that's this little corner here, and these are amongst some of the first insects I collected. Can you see the number 59 written there somewhere? Up there, can you see 59 under one of those beetles? Maybe not. That means in 1959 I started collecting insects. That is 63 years ago, before Mum and Dad were born. All right? And so, such a long time ago, but anyway, I've enjoyed collecting those, particularly, that was my favourite. In fact, here is my very favourite jewel beetle that I collected. The excitement I had, they're right there, those green ones, you can see them in the picture up there, those green ones, they're right there. And I was so excited when I collected those. It was a Sabbath afternoon, we were with all the church out visiting a natural reserve, and there up in the Mallee Blossom, there were 3 of these that had come into, in fact there were more than 3. I ended up keeping 3 of them. And aren't they pretty? Look at the green, the way it's just iridescent, the way its colours come up. Just so pretty, aren't they? But my point is that this insect, the jewel beetle, all of these jewel beetles, came from those horrible grubs, or a larva is another name that we used to call them, because here's the insect cycle. The adult beetle lays an egg. Can you see the little dot of an egg on just above where it's written? It's almost too faint to see. And then when that egg hatches, out comes a tiny little creepy crawly about that long, which is the baby larva or grub, and it starts to eat its way through. It might be very small roots to start with. Then up the trunk. It starts getting bigger and bigger, and you can see it getting bigger and bigger there until it's a horrible looking creature. And then we call it pupating. It means it's turned into the next section, which is a kind of a hibernation time, and it actually rests. And the whole body of the grub changes into the adult beetle eventually. Now that process, I'm going to put up a big word for you now. Have you ever heard of that word before, metamorphosis? It's a terrible one, isn't it? Have you heard it before, Ocean? Oh, did I give it to you last night? No? Okay. All right. Metamorphosis. Metamorphosis is the word that the scientists use to describe the insect cycle. The egg becoming a grub or a caterpillar in some cases, and then that becoming a pupa, all right, that chrysalis that it holds on to for a while. Its body changes, and out comes the adult, and there's the adult jewel beetle. Now, the reason why I wanted to show you and talk about this just for a moment this morning is to say this provides us for an excellent illustration in the Christian's life. Now, this is getting a little bit heavy here, but I'm sure you'll just pick up the essence of what I'm meaning. In the book of Romans, it talks about when you become a Christian, when you give your life to Jesus and you are a saved person, Jesus will come into your life, he will change your life, and he actually uses a word here, which is, can you see it? I've written it down the bottom again. It's the word that I've underlined. It's in our English Bibles. We have be transformed. But in the Greek Bible, it uses the word metamorphosis. How about that? So the process of an ugly grub caterpillar becoming a beautiful jewel beetle, that is illustrated through my insects and the life cycle of ugliness becoming beauty. And Jesus uses that very language, or Paul, who is the writer of the book of Romans, is using that very language to describe the Christian life. You come to Jesus, he accepts you, he gives you the gift of eternal life, but then he transforms, he changes us, and our life becomes a witness for him. And that's a wonderful truth. And we become a beautiful person in which people begin to understand something about Jesus and his love. I hope you enjoyed the story, and I hope you'll see the connection between what I'm saying about metamorphosis in the insect world and how that also happens in the experience of the born-again Christian. Okay? You can go back. Thanks for coming today, and you guys too. We appreciate that. I'm sorry I kept forgetting to look back over there. But thanks for coming, and have a good rest of the day.